Hello everybody, James here. Storytime with Dutch Mantell, episode 57. I'm already coughing. I'm going to carry on, I don't care. We've already messed up the first one. Right, before we do the usual plugs, I want to say we are now on Facebook. Dutch is on Facebook already with the personal accounts, but Storytime with Dutch Mantell is now on Facebook as well. It's facebook.com/Storytime with Dutch Mantell. Just search it, you'll find it.
I didn't know that. This is news to me. No, this is news to me.
Oh.
Really?
I thought you'd seen it on the Twittery thing.
Hey, never assume that I have done anything. Because the likelihood of me not doing it, I think, is probably higher than the likelihood of me doing it. Now, I could have stumbled across it like everybody else would probably do, but I'm glad.
I don't know why I didn't do it earlier. But anyway, we've got a Facebook page out, so please give us a follow there. We'll post the odd clip there as well, you know, from the classics, from the archives, let's say. And where are we going to go now? So we'll do the regular plugs. So iTunes, give us 5 stars if you can. Books, we've got, in fact, we'll do T-shirts for 2 T-shirts at the moment. Anyway, you people mean nothing to me. And Respect the Stash, both featuring Dutch Mantell, of course. And we've also got 4 books. Yeah, sorry. You like them, don't you? You like Respect the Stash?
Oh, I like Respect the Stash. I like that a lot.
We've got 4 books as well. We'll do Dutch's first because that's like the order the pile was on the chair. Tales from a Dirt Road. That's available on Amazon. The World According to Dutch. That's available on Amazon. If you want them signed, you don't go to Amazon. You go to dirtydutchmantell with 2 L's at gmail.com. You make your request there. And I've got 2 books as well. The Rock, The People's Champion. A biography of The Rock. The best one out there ever. By a long way. High margin, and also the best biography of Owen Hart ever, Owen Hart, king of pranks. And I'm pretty confident saying that definitely both the 2 best biographies ever written by on those 2. And anything to say, Dutch? Because I've just sort of like rambled and surprised you with a Facebook page.
Well, let me. How is that Rock book? Good.
It's great.
Really
cool. Yeah, it's got 4.7 stars, I think, on Amazon. That's pretty highly respectable.
No. I could believe that it'd be good if you wrote it because, you know, if your writing has anything to do with your speaking, which I think it does, it should be very good. And you never sent me a copy. You never sent me a copy.
You never asked for a copy, and I'm a cheap bastard.
You are cheap, just like all the rest of those British wrestlers I knew. You know who was a cheap bastard?
Go on.
John Foley was one. And who was the guy in Texas that was there?
Adams.
Chris Adams was a cheap bastard. But you're taught this early on in this business because it's kind of tough getting in. Guys getting in today don't know the struggle that the earlier guys went through. It was tough. See, we used to stay at Motel 4s, which is 2 levels down from a Motel 6.
It's the 33.3% off.
Oh, yeah, it was. But if it hadn't been for those places, you know, I talk about like it was so bad, but I was young then. We were all young. So back in the good old days when things were bad, we did it because, thinking back on it now, it was a lot of fun. It really was.
Yeah, beats a regular job, doesn't it? Definitely.
No shit. Oh, I couldn't. Somebody said, "You ever think about getting a real job?" I said, "Like what?" Oh, I don't know. I said, "No, I've never really thought that deeply on it, really." But just think you can ride with somebody for, say, 2 hours to a town that you're going to have a wrestling match. And you would still make more, even by the guarantee, than you would by working a job 2 days. So that cost you, it was time to get there and time to get back. And sometimes you have to have a hotel. But if you weren't making ends meet, then you needed to leave, which I have a lot of times. But sometimes the enjoyment surrounding that was priceless. I mean, you would be entertained 24 hours a day, especially by wrestler bullshit. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me, the shit they could come up with, shit they could get into, the rumors. Like every day when we get in the car, we'd say, all right, what's going on today? What's going on? And it was like our own personal soap opera that we were living in real time. Oh, it was great. I'll get more into that later on in some of our podcasts, but
do you know what?
Crazy.
I've just realised that I've not like sort of said the big announcement that we're going. This might be just trial for now, but do you want to make the announcement?
Yeah, let's make it.
Okay. We are going, at least short term and maybe long term, we're going to go to 2 episodes a week. The reason being, well, there's many reasons. I've explained quite a lot of them to you, Dutch, just beforehand. But one of the reasons why we're doing this is because I get so many questions, and you actually get some questions as well. You sent me some questions into the show, and we're just not getting to them. And we are doing like fan question episodes like once a month, and we're getting through nothing. I looked at my I've got a big file where it says like questions previously sent in that we haven't answered yet, or you haven't answered yet. And it ran about 35,000 words. And I was like, okay, that's a small book's worth of questions. And a lot of these are very, very short questions as well. So I thought, okay, what we need to do is we need to get to more fan questions. And we're going to do that every, I think, Tuesday. So this podcast comes out, Storytime with Dutch, every Friday. And then we're going to have another one coming out on Tuesday. It's going to be a little companion piece, somewhere between 35 and 45 minutes. And then we'll see how it goes from there. And I know that's your favourite bit of the show as well, because you always like answering the fan questions best. Because maybe it's just because they're so random.
Well, it makes me think, and it makes me think sometimes how astute, you like that word, how astute some of the fans are, because they notice things. Because I've known that for years and years and years anyway, even by... And you've heard me say this, the fans never forget. That's when you do an angle and you do something that doesn't quite fit it, and they go, wait a minute, that doesn't belong in there. It's already an outlier, and they can already start picking it apart. But when you do an angle that is hard to pick apart, that is the angles that last. Like the bloodline angle, hard to pick that apart. Very, very hard. You would really be nitpicking to do it. But, and I do think that is probably and not only mine, I think a lot of fans do, that's probably the greatest angle they've ever seen. Not only for the length of time it took to get to this point, and they're not done, they actually have a hell of a lot more that they could do with it. So, very interesting to see how that's going to play out. But anyway, the fans, hey, without the fans, this business wouldn't be a business. It would have folded up his cot and went home years ago. But the fans, they keep this business running, keep it clicking. I mean, and I've said this before, I don't think you can kill this business. You can make a hell of an attempt.
Yeah, people have tried.
People have tried, unknowingly tried. And I've tried for 50 years myself. And it's just the wrestling business refuses to die. Because I don't know what it is about it, but those fans will keep coming back and keep coming back till you actually just slap them in the face so much they just can't watch it anymore. Which I think WWE has made several strong attempts at that. People saying, no, I can't watch that shit no more. And I can see a match now. I'm going, oh, my God. See, I've seen so many matches, they just all blend together. Like when you tell me something, now I got to think, wait a minute, 19 so-and-so in this building. I remember the building. Now I got to go back and I got to piece it together. But most of the time, if it's halfway fairly infamous, I will remember that. But anyway, continue.
Well, speaking of halfway infamous, you know where I'm going to go with this anyway. But I'll read the preamble first. AEW, various injuries and risky moves, infamous moves, maybe sort of tie it in. At Forbidden Door, the pay-per-view gone this weekend, Bryan Danielson ended up receiving a broken arm thanks to a I was going to attempt his first name. Okada top rope elbow. Danielson blamed himself because he said he didn't get his arm into a safe place like that. And then Kenny Omega nearly just died after suffering a bad fall, taking some horrendous Tiger Driver from Will Ospreay. But the strangest botch of the week was on yesterday as we record this, 2 days ago as this released, AEW Dynamite, when the 64-year-old Sting attempts to do... just tell us the entire... We're not going to watch it because it's too brand new, and you never know when Don Stevens might try and copyright strike us, so...
Oh, my God. So, I'm watching this, right? Oh, let me go back to Kenny Omega. And who was he working with? What was his name?
Will Ospreay.
Will Ospreay. I guess they call it the Tiger Driver. Mm-hmm. Well, it's like a suplex, but straight down on your shoulders and neck. He dropped him is what he did, I think. This is what happens when a wrestler gets tired. And Will Ospreay shouldn't get tired because he's in great shape. And he's went 30 minutes, 40 minutes a lot of times. But I don't think he got him up to put him down in this Tiger Driver. But I think he lost him somehow. And Kenny Omega is lucky that he's walking today. I mean, he landed. And sometimes you can see guys get hurt. I would have thought he would have gotten hurt and all that, but he didn't. Just for, what's that old saying? God protects idiots and little children.
I've never heard of that one.
I don't know if that fits him, but he's very lucky. But I think what happened, and it wasn't negligence on his part. I think he got tired and he had to muscle him up and he ran out of steam and he dropped him on his head. But anyway, Kenny Omega is lucky to be walking.
Well, we can also say, because Will Ospreay is carrying a lot of injuries at the moment, so maybe he just can't do certain things. I mean, you said tired, a huge factor. And also, after the 20, 30-minute mark, you're going to be covered in sweat anyway, so it's so easy to drop somebody.
Well, I think that's a combination of all those together created the spot. And we're not going to show it, are we?
No, as I say,
okay.
We actually do, on YouTube, we have the ability to show these kinds of things, but occasionally I just think, as I say, in case AEW tries to copyright strike, because we'd be referring to it, reviewing it, discussing it, so therefore we can show short clips. But in this case, I'm just not going to bother. Also, it was on pay-per-view, so I don't even think the footage is that readily available for us.
Anyway, I'm glad Omega's okay. But the spot we're going to talk about took me by surprise. They put this ladder in the ring, and a lot of people may have seen this. And I saw it before you sent it to me. It was making the rounds anyway.
You sent it to me.
Oh, I did?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. I may have. But it stunned me. I mean, Sting is in the ring, and his little partner, what's his name?
Darby Allin.
High-faced Darby Allin. He set the ladder up and looked at Sting, and Sting looked at him, and I went, no. And Sting went up on the ladder, because it was over closer to the ropes, and the steps he was on were, pointed out. He was closer to where he wanted to go than away from it. And he was going to jump or dive over the rope, and he had to be 12 feet in the air. But he misjudged, or he didn't push enough. And he had two tables set up out there, and the guy was on one of them. And he barely made the first table, and his chin hit the table. His feet and knees just hit the floor.
His chin hit his knee. He chinned
Is that what it was?
Straight into the knee of Sammy Guevara.
Oh my God. And I thought he was dead. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, Sting. You're like 65, 64. You never did that move before in your life? What possessed you to get on a ladder and act like you're 22 and dive off? That was never your forte anyway. I mean, and you could tell he was hurt. Everybody in the crowd could tell that he was hurt. Now, the appreciation is there on my part, and I'm sure the fans, for him to try such a move at his age. But still, now he goes back to here. Why in the F did he want to jump off that ladder? So I don't know if it's being in an AEW dressing room. I don't know if can ignorance be, is it contagious if ignorance? But I don't know how they talked him into this. But I did put something on my Twitter. Okay, Sting, this is your answer. The next time they ask you to do this, say not no, but hell no. So, and he's lucky too. He's lucky that he didn't tear his head half off, knock 3 or 4 or 5 teeth out, and hurt his knees and his back. I mean, that would be a whole body injury. But when I saw it, I went, I don't know. And I've been saying the moves that some of these AEW guys do, somebody is really, really going to get hurt. And I don't know if Tony Khan signs off on them or not. He may not even know about them. So
someone's signing off on them. I'm sure. Maybe Bryan Danielson gave an interview recently, and he said he goes to somebody with an idea, and they have to give it the yay or nay. So somebody's signing off on it somewhere, whether it's the road agents or if it goes to the EVPs or if it goes to Tony himself. But someone's greenlighting a lot of this stuff. Well,
in Sting's case, I think it's his idea. He wants to do it. Oh, okay, go ahead. Then they're not going to tell him no because of who Sting is. But Sting may wish somebody had put the stop on that before he did it. But anyway, that surprised me. I've never seen him do the move before. Again, I think that some of that ignorance in the AEW locker room, and not ignorance, I mean, not dumbassy stuff, but just not knowing. Ignorance is not knowing. But Sting should have known. And I don't know. So, I doubt if he practiced the move before he did it.
Like a great big foam pit.
Oh my God! But anyway, I'm glad he's okay, and we'll go from there.
Well, Sting said he got on the mic. I believe he won the match with the Scorpion Deathlock afterwards. I saw everything up to that bit, and then I sort of stopped. And he said after the show, got on the microphone, "I'm going to have a bunch of stitches in my lip." So he's probably right there. I think he also halfway knocked out one of his teeth as well. And partly it's not actually Sting's fault. I know that sounds weird, but for his age, he's no spring chicken, but he did spring quite well off the ladder. Apparently, part of the issue was, and the commentators picked this up at the time, so it isn't in the clip that you shared, but the commentators picked it up when the tables were being set. Taz or whoever said, those tables are too far. Even on commentaries, these tables are way too far. No one's ever going to get wherever they're. And Sting actually did do a pretty good leap, but even, obviously, at his age and his weight and everything, he can only jump so far. And then he ends up with his chin on Guevara's knee. And then he's got the look of somebody who's not knocked out, but just like mentally calculating just how hurt am I? Like he goes like that.
He was probably saying, God, I'm alive. Oh, yeah. You know that the thing on TV. This is when he realized he'd effed up.
And
that was no. I think they should send that to those people because I think they'd buy it. I do. This is when he realized he'd effed up, and then Joe Sting's face like, oh my God. But I mean, let me tell you what else happened. Darby Allin, if you notice that he stayed with the ladder, but he was on the far side.
Yes.
So where he needed to hold it down, he was off center too. He should have been on the steps that Sting went off of.
Of course, so he's
He
kicking
needed,
out, isn't he?
yeah, he's kicking out and back, right? And that's where Darby Allin was. So that just means the top of the ladder will move a little bit, but that keeps Sting from getting a good footing. Now, Peter may be been in the front of the ladder, which is obvious, I think, but it may have Sting may have dodged an injury. But when he kicked up and kicked back, now I think that's where he lost it. He lost his push, and that's why he come up short.
They never teach that in wrestling school, do they? What side of the ladder you've got to stand on where someone does a dive?
Well, if somebody really thinks about it, you can actually go in the ring and it will tell you, if you just watch what you're doing, it's common sense. It's physics put into practical application. It's what it is. Mm. But I'm sure Sting, when he came off, when he pushed out, you could tell that all of a sudden his momentum had died. Exactly when he come off, and you could tell right then. I mean, you don't have time to think, but you could tell something is off, and it was. What if he never even hit the table?
What would it have been funnier? It may have been funnier if that happened.
I'm laughing, but it's not funny. But if he'd have lost all his push and just landed flat right in front of the table, and the guy on the table rolls over and goes, "You missed me." Hey, that is not funny. You shouldn't be laughing. So, but anyway, folks, if you haven't seen this, go and find it. Go on YouTube.
It's on your Twitter. It's on your Twitter.
It is on my Twitter. It is on my Twitter. And I give him the answer, just say not no, but hell no. And I don't know why would he agree to this?
I don't know. Maybe he just wants to feel sprightly and youthful and have a load of stitches in his lip and regret it immediately.
Well, if I was the agent with that and they say Sting wants to go through the table, I'd have to say no. Because the drawbacks of that is him getting hurt, for one thing. And I mean, you're gonna get hurt in this business, even being careful. But that was just too much. And it didn't even match Sting's character at all. Sting's actually too heavy to do that now. He probably weighs, I don't know, 240, 250, maybe. Because he's kind of thick now. But anyway, I bet we won't see that done again.
By Sting, at least. Someone else will do it next week, I'm sure. We'll also move into a more AEW stuff, Forbidden Door and Dynamite. Jungle Boy Jack Perry has become a jungle man, and he has turned bad guy. I always try not to say heels and faces, because I'm not a wrestler, but I like to say bad guy. And he's turned on Hook. I sent you the video where there's a fan camera on YouTube, and he turns around and sort of goes bleh, and gives him a bit of a clothesline, and Hook stays down for like a minute and a half. But that was the turn, and then he comes out on Dynamite and gives a interview, a promo explaining his actions. What did you think of it all?
Well, I didn't see the actual angle. You said you sent it to me?
Yeah. You didn't see it?
I didn't get it. I didn't see it.
Do you want to see it?
But anyway, we can.
It'd take too long to tee it up. Forget it. It was a clothesline.
Well, anyway, wrestling fans, they won't even look at that. They just think that he's just a bad guy now. But the interview wasn't bad. Jungle Boy showed more personality and more character in this interview than I've ever seen before. And he did it with the right guy. I'm going to have to give Tony Khan, if this is his idea or whose ever idea it was, I'd have to give him an A on the idea. Because now you got two guys, young guys, that will work their butts off every night, and they'll get this angle over. Because Jungle Boy needed an angle. He needed a promo. I mean, an angle he could get into And Jungle Boy needed the same thing. Jungle Boy he was a baby face, and he was at a stage where he was like, he's just on this level, but he's really not going any higher. He's not going any lower either, but he's just
Stagnant.
stuck on this level. Yes. And he needed something like this with a guy exactly like Hook, because Hook was in the same boat. They're both on that level, but there was nothing about them that made them stand out or stand apart from the other guys. And this will. So put them together and let's see what they can do. I'm kind of interested in this angle. I think these guys would do good with it.
Yeah, it's actually nice to see two young guys who I suspect are hungry to prove themselves, because that can really elevate them both if they just have their own little issue. And they've got something to prove to themselves as well as everybody watching.
Well, this puts them on a different plane. Now this makes them, they can join other guys. See, Jungle Boy can join the other heels. Now he will be not over, but he will, by osmosis, he will get some of their heat. And Hook, by the same token, he can go up with the baby faces and team up with them, which puts him on a higher level. So if both of them move up one level, that is an advancement. And all this does, when they build this body of work, now they get people invested in them. Now you can do a lot with them. So I'm going to say AEW, they did this one right. Maybe the angle leading into it, the clothesline, yeah. maybe that's suspect. But this is an angle that books itself, basically. Put them together and just take your time with it and see where it goes. Listen to those people, because they're the arbiters of whether this angle is going to get over or not. The response from the crowd, you listen to that, and they'll tell you exactly where to go. What you got to watch in this angle, though, is putting the cart ahead of the horses, because sometimes you get in too much of a hurry. Take your time. They got time anyway. How long has AEW been in business?
On about getting towards 4 years now. But I was going to actually just jump in there. The one thing that AEW does that WWE doesn't, because it always used to be take your time. AEW takes too much time to never get anywhere. And then I think like Keith Lee and someone else has been in a feud for like a year, and they've just never done anything with it. They start something, and then they sort of just forget about it. I don't think that'll happen with this one, though.
No, I don't think they know where to go with Keith Lee. I mean, I'm not impressed by Keith Lee anyway. He's a big guy. But
he turned up looking like his own dad. You know, he was in WWE, and he looked like, dark hair, clean cut, and then he turns up in AEW like 2 years later. He's completely grey. He's put on another 50 pounds. It's amazing how quick he aged.
Who's his dad?
No, he's his own father, he looked like.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought you said. He looked like his dad. I'm saying, wait a minute, who's his dad? But no, I don't think they will have that problem with Jungle Boy and Hickey Doo, Majigger, Hook.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll add a couple more things then. One, I thought, did you ever watch that 70s show?
Never watched it. Clips of it, maybe.
Right. Oh, right. Okay. So Jungle Boy looked just like Danny Masterson from that 70s show. You'll have to find a photo. I'll put it up on the screen, maybe, if I remember. And similarly, I thought Jungle Boy's interview on Dynamite was really WWE-esque in the sense that it was the old Stephanie McMahon line where she points at the crowd and goes, "I've done something bad because each and every one of you." He didn't quite say that, but it's that WWE 101 sort of turn on the crowd kind of interview.
Well, I kind of like that. I kind of like that interview because it's not you. Every great heel blames everybody else. He is always the victim. People are working against me. The office is working against me. This guy is working against me. And that justifies whatever he did, seemingly in his own head, except the people aren't agreeing with him. And when he blames the crowd, now he's blaming you personally for his own actions that you made him do. So I've always liked that. They'll blame everybody else under the sun except themselves. So, and you've known people like that in real life.
Oh yeah, God, yeah.
They blame everybody else except the ones that should be blamed, and that's themselves. I kind of like that interview because hell, I've done a bunch of them. I always blame the fans. You. And then when we used to make this like the same towns over and over, you could actually attack the town, the sports teams in the towns, something that happened in the town that people they know about. So if you can centralize it down to that group, and it's what Jungle Boy did. You're the reason I did this. So I liked the interview. I really did. And I'm actually, out of all the things that AEW has done, I think this is the one I'm most invested in right now to see where they go with it.
Yeah, I think so. So this will be a very quick question, but did you see Bad Guy in Jungle Boy 1 or 2 years ago? Did you think he had it in him?
Well, I think he had it in him. I couldn't visualize how to do it. But then when I saw Hook, I think that I may not have thought, initially that, you should do it on Hook. But that's the best one they could have picked.
Mm-hmm.
Because Hook is like what they call a white meat baby face. And they can just eat him up and do. And I've said, I may have said here too, that whoever gets to Hook will be immediately over.
Mm-hmm.
Because the people want to. And the only thing about wrestling is, they want Jungle Boy to get his comeuppance. They want to see Hook give it back to Jungle Boy and just beat the shit out of him and leave him laying. And they'd be happy for about 20 seconds. Then they say, wait a minute. Now what? He's got back at him. So where do we go from here? That's why I was famous for this. Oh, I could beat my heel. That's easy because you get a pop out of the people. Now they're happy for about 20 seconds. Then I'd have the heels come back, and I may have to bring one from the outside, but we'd get that baby face down and he would pay for what he's done. And now you involve another person from both sides. Now you got a tag team, and you go from there. See, booking, people have asked me this, what are you going to be a booker? Well, nothing really, except maybe be in charge of putting wrestling matches together. But anybody can be a booker. Anybody. Okay. I say, okay, James, tonight, I want you to go in the ring and I want you to hit wrestler A in the head with a 2x4. Oh, yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. So we do it. Now we come back the second week. What are we going to do? Okay. The guy you hit in the head with a 2x4, wrestler A. I said, wrestler A, listen, I want you to go in the ring tonight and hit James in the head with a 2x4. Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. But now if you think about it, we're back to where we were 2 weeks ago. We went back. So you have to know when to do certain things. Now, the most obvious thing now is week 2, when you go in the ring to hit him in the head with the 2x4, he runs. So now you want to see him get popped in the head. So that's what booking is. So if you can kind of don't give them the payoff too soon, and when you give them the payoff, you can immediately go into something else, or you can drop out of the angle for 2 weeks and then come back into it. give the people just enough time to forget it. But they didn't forget it. Remember, fans don't forget. And then the second week, he comes in and he does something. And why did he do it? Well, now we know this backstory, why he did it. That's the beauty to booking, and that's the secret of it. Mm-hmm. Makes sense?
Absolutely. So it's like a soap opera. There's always got to be a cliffhanger at the end to take you to the next one, We're going to move on.
Wait a minute. Something I was going to bring up.
Go on.
And you predicted this. See, I'm telling everybody, James, what a Nostradamus you are.
Mm.
You are the predictor of the future. I think we ask each other, I don't know if the fans knew this or not, but I said, what do you think the viewership number will be on this? And you said 830,000.
Yeah, I was 14 out. Yeah.
And they did 816. So you missed it by 14,000, which is unbelievable that you got that close. What would be more unbelievable if you said 816? So
it's like the Price is Right. It's like the Price is Right sort of thing. You know, you could be so much under but not over. But I got over, so maybe you technically lost there, but I don't know. I didn't win the prize.
But this week, they dropped under 600,000.
Mm-hmm.
That means they lost between week 1 and week 2 almost, was it 25%?
It may be, it's somewhere between 25 and 30, yes. I'm just looking at them. 595 they got. 27% drop.
A 27% drop. Now, I'm going to tell Tony Khan this. It's useless to say, why did it drop? Because it dropped for a number of reasons. Saturday night probably be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
People watched the first show, and it was a good show, but it didn't burn them out. I mean, it didn't set them on fire. And I'm saying that AEW might see a lot of shows underneath that 595 mark.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're coming into college football season, and those big college games will be on Saturday night. It's a great night for football. And I'm saying on the Saturday night show, we could see in the range of 400,000, 450,000.
I think easily, yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know what they're thinking, but I don't know.
Will Collision be preempted for basketball when basketball season starts coming back up?
Will Collision
be preempted for basketball? I don't know how much basketball happens on a Saturday night.
Is it on the same channel as Rampage?
Yeah, TBS or TNT. I think they both got some sports on. What is it like? One's got hockey and one's got basketball. I don't know.
I don't follow the TBS channel that much. The family. So, but I'm sure if they got preempted because of basketball on what was the channel that Rampage is on, TBS?
Yeah, so Collision is on TNT.
So is basketball on TNT?
I don't know. You're asking me a load of channels I've never seen.
I don't know either.
No, let's leave it then.
But I'm saying, even if they're not preempted, people are going to be watching the football game, or a lot of them, because the bars have it on, and a lot more interest in college football than wrestling. Mm. Okay, continue.
Batista has confirmed that he was supposed to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. He was supposed to be the head inductee, in fact, this year, but couldn't make due to filming commitments. Now, I asked you beforehand, and I thought we'd throw it in anyway. So you and Batista were in the WWE around the same time when he returned, and then you were doing the Zeb Coulter thing with Jack Swagger. He was at the Royal Rumble when he got booed mercilessly. Specifically, do you remember that incident first?
Well, I was probably there, and I noticed that, and I don't know Batista well. Actually, I've just met him a couple of times, even though I was in the same company. You know, he was a top guy, and I was with me and Swagger. We were like in the middle. So that intersectionality, we didn't cross with him that much. But I could tell something was wrong with him, because he acted pissed off about every time I saw him, even though I met him once. And I met him, he could have been a meet and greet for me. I'm backstage getting ready, and he's getting backstage getting ready, but still, he he's over there and I'm over here. But he acted pissed off about something, worried about something. And I never was on the companion scale to where I could go up and say, hey, what's the matter? Because we didn't start at the same time. And he went through OVW and I was actually doing real wrestling out starving to death on the roads. But he acted pissed off. And I guess after they booed him in that Royal Rumble, I think it came to a head right after that. Because I think Vince may have suggested he turn heel, and he didn't want to do that. And but he was gone shortly thereafter.
There was the Bootista chant, which I loved.
Yep.
Then there was Blue-Tista when he turned up in blue trunks that time, which was great. And then, but he really got legitimately butthurt over the reactions. He couldn't sort of understand why everyone wasn't cheering him. But I mean, from an outsider looking in, it's clearly the Triple H buddy system, and it's you're inserting somebody. Not that Batista wasn't. Batista was really good in about 2010 when he just before he left, because in the last 6 months, just before he left to basically retire from wrestling, he just stopped caring, and then he became a bad guy, and then he started wearing like teenage girls' clothes, like jeans and like these crop top t-shirts and stuff like that, and he just came across as like such a tool, but in a great wrestling way, and it was the best stuff he ever did. And then he wants to come back as a good guy, but times have changed, I suppose, in the 4 years intervening. And in June that year, he actually quit for creative differences.
Yeah, I like that. Creative differences can mean anything. It means you just don't like them, or you're not making enough money, or you perceive yourself as being like, screwed. And this is what's one of the things that wrestlers have, and it's I call it white line fever. When we used to drive between towns, you had all this time to think. And when I used to drive, I would never play the radio. I'd just drive, unless I was listening to talk radio. But when wrestlers get all that time to think, they can think themselves into a bad place. They can think themselves into a bad condition. And you can actually convince yourself, yeah, you are getting screwed, even if you just start thinking about it. I call it white line fever, but it's a form of mental illness, I think, because you don't notice it because it comes over you. And I've had this happen to me, driving and say it's a long trip. It's like over 200 miles, and you're steady hearing the highway sound and cars passing. You're there, but you're not there. Have you done this? You ever done this when you're driving a long way?
I always listen to music. Do you know, I always listen to podcasts that I'm familiar with, or I listen to music loudly and sing along to it. So it actually stops me from overthinking in that sense.
Well, I may have should have been listening to the radio, but I didn't sometimes, or most of the time. And then you can think yourself into a bad way. You really can. Mm-hmm. You can get mad at things that didn't happen, but you have convinced yourself that was the intent of it. So, and I've seen a lot of guys do that. And whether Batista did this or not, I doubt it, because we were all flying between shots. But he was whoever was in his ear, or if he was in his ear by himself, I think he got himself believing that WWE was screwing him. And so he quit.
Creative, right? When I just said creative differences before, you won't know the band. Anyway, there's a famous band in this country called The Beautiful South, and when they finally broke up in 2007, they cited creative similarities, which I thought was a great line.
Mm-hmm. How could they quote that? They were their own creative influences, right?
That was that was the point. It was just a stupid line to throw out there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with myself. What's that?
Yeah. I'm gonna bin off the last question. We'll save it for another time. It's something Kurt Angle said. We'll move on. Right, so we're gonna move on to the meat of the podcast and Junkyard Dog, Dark Side of the Ring. You didn't watch this one, but you don't really need to watch it. So I watched it, made a load of notes, made a load of questions about it, and the first one is universally loved first time you met the dog.
Oh, the first time I met him, I think I was in Tennessee, and he was coming through. He wasn't there long, as a lot of Tennessee people who've worked the territory can attest. Good guy, big guy. Even when you meet him, you could tell there's something different about him. The way he talked, and he was friendly. It's like you've known him 10 years, and he has a way of talking to you that makes you feel like he's an old friend. And he was good like that. That's the first time I met him. Second time, I think I met him in Mid-South, where he was already the big star. And he went to Mid-South. And let me tell you, Mid-South is operating their philosophy. In that part of the United States, Mississippi and Louisiana, Arkansas, is predominantly or heavily African American. And if they had an African American wrestler, hey, that was it. Because he became their dog. He was their dog. And man, when he would go in some of those buildings, those fans they were loud. And you couldn't touch him. I mean, those people were going nuts. They wanted to see the dog get up and make his comeback, win the match, do his little dance outside the ring. He was their guy. And he was over big time. Ernie Ladd, I think, started the African-American baby face there. Because they all start them off as heels. Then they turn them. That's what Ladd did. And I think Junkyard Dog did the same thing. But he was over big time. Because his interviews, I won't say you kind of feel his interview. He was jumping around, and he was a big guy, and he was pitch-and-toed too. So, and he was a football player before. I forgot where he played at. He may have played in North Carolina AT&T, but very good football player. I think he played a little pro ball too. But when Bill Watts saw him, Bill Watts immediately said, "Bing, bing, I got the guy." And then he went in there and he got over, and he stayed over, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. Mm-hmm. But one reason he stayed over is because of the caliber of heel he was working with. He was working with Jake the Snakes. He was working with Ted DiBiase's. He was working with those guys that, I mean, they could have a match with a broom. So, and DiBiase I always thought was great in the ring, and Jake too. But different styles, but very, very effective. Because when you sit back and watch these guys work, if you know what to look for, it's the little things. Like Jake the Snake never did a lot, but whatever he did was effective and it worked. I mean, he had what I call it no lost moves. Mm-hmm. He didn't put a lot of moves on just to put moves on. He had a reason for it. DiBiase the same way. Jake was more psychological, because you thought Jake was kind of crazy anyway, and DiBiase was more the technical wrestler. So they took both those styles, and when they worked with Dog, they blended them in, which takes talent, and they blew the roof off some of these buildings. And Bill Watts, he was always on the lookout for an African American like the Dog to head the baby faces. And he found him, and he rode that lightning boat for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, however long it lasted.
Fayetteville State University, JYD played for.
North Carolina.
Yeah, in the documentary Dark Side of the Ring on the Junkyard Dog, Ted DiBiase takes a lot of credit for, and probably deservedly so, basically getting Junkyard Dog to the point where he could have a really good match with the limited amount of stuff he could do. So I think Ted, as you said, because he was trained by the Funks, and he says on the documentary so as well, you focus on the positives, you see what you can do well, and you stick to what you can do well, and then you sort of make the match from that point. And it seems really, really obvious to say it now, but I think I hadn't really realised what a good, almost like teacher on the job Ted was.
Well, he was great. Jake is like, he's like the maestro, the band leader,
the puppet master.
And he would get in the ring and he'd play around for a couple of minutes, and he would see what the people were popping to, and every crowd is different. I heard a comedian go one time, he was on the stage and he walked all around the stage and he'd say something, he'd go to the next part of the stage and the next part. And what he told the people, he says, I'm trying to find the funny corner, which was a joke, but it's actually true. Because, when Ted would get in the ring, he'd walk around that ring and he'd check the people over here and over there. And I call it checking the temperature of the room. It's what he did. And it wasn't the big things that you did with the dog there. It's the little things, like the test of strength or whatever. And sometimes the little things would just blow the roof off. So when you get in the ring and you find the crowd is like that, now you know that you're going to have a great match, no matter what you do. I mean, you could probably lay down in the ring and go to sleep for 30 seconds. And they'd be screaming like, what are you doing? They'd be doing something. Jake was the maestro, and Jake was the maestro, and Ted was too. He had probably had two of the best in-ring instructors ever, and they were both in the same territory at the same time in the Mid-South. So and Watts needed somebody to like put Hacksaw Jim Duggan with. Now you can imagine you got those two heels like DiBiase and Jake, both have heat on their own. Put them together, team them up, and team them up against Junkyard Dog and what's your other big baby faces there? Duggan. Put them together. Sometimes you could just put them together and draw a sellout. You don't even have to do anything with them. It's just their publicity precedes them. And I think they would sell out on their own. Maybe they won't sell out the Superdome, but they would do a hell of a house in there. And I think Dog came along right at the right time, because Watts had been working up to that point, but Watts didn't want to work. I mean, he wanted to run the business, and I can see why. Trying to run the business and trying to wrestle too, trying to work too, is almost too much. I've done it. I was much, much younger. I've done it. And I think, like our guest last week, Ron Fuller, he's done it too. But he'll tell you how difficult that is. So, and your question was, or did you have a question?
No, more or less it. Just one more thing on JYD just for now is the documentary makes mention of this. I've heard it quite a few times before, but it's still genius. Is that obviously, I won't use the pejorative term, but there are ladies around the wrestling business, and some of the top stars have quite a lot of ladies to choose from. And Junkyard Dog was on, I don't know if he was, someone must have told him to do it, but he was in the sort of like top tier of, not only did he have his choice of the ladies, he also said, they ain't getting a piece of me unless they're paying for my meal and they're paying for presents for me and everything like that. So he made money off the dates as well. Fantastic.
Well, I don't know how he told them that, but I think they knew it. And if the women were competing for him, they knew exactly what to do. And Junkyard was probably kidding when he said it, but then it started to work. He said, well, hell, I'll just keep this up. But let me tell you, like, see, we had words for girls like that at the matches. I don't use because they're commonly known as ring rats or just rats. I never called them that. I called them a more affectionate term, little ladies of the matches. Mm-hmm. But everybody knew what I was talking about. So, and I bet he would go to every town and he would probably have as many as probably 10 female associates in that town, which is okay if you're not married, and which is okay if the little ladies of the matches don't find out about each other. So when that happens, now you got a problem. And I have seen guys sit in the dressing room and they're like this, they going, oh God, so what's the matter? What's the matter? Oh God, oh God. Like what? And you know he's seeing some girl, but the other girl you knew about, but now they found out about each other. So he's trying to figure out a way he wanted to keep both of them, but sometimes that's not possible. And that's just some of the backstage stuff that kept me occupied.
The gossip.
All these years. And Dog, that was his, if a guy got himself in that situation, I can't help him. Nobody can help him. He's playing it by ear, and it's his problem, so let him deal with it. Now, if Dog had that situation, and I'm sure he did, again, good luck.
Well, some of the ladies may well have known and maybe even enjoyed knowing that there were other ladies involved. And maybe they joined at the same time, who knows? And
who knows?
I was going to give you a line.
Okay, give it to me.
It's a famous sitcom line from Peep Show. And the main one character asks the other one, like, would you ever want a threesome? And he says, well, no, because that's just one more person I can't look in the eye afterwards.
That is funny, but you'd have to take it in context. But I'm sure it was funny. But anyway, yeah. Why do you bring up the females?
Oh, it's just because Junkyard Dog was getting paid for getting laid. Well done for him. We're going to move on. And Louisiana, one of Mid-South's most famous towns for quite a few reasons. One of them is probably because it was by far the roughest. Stories of, bad guys' cars getting tires slashed and burnt out, and just, if you're a bad guy in Louisiana, be aware. Have you got any personal stories of traveling through that town and anything terrible happening to you or your property?
Well, I got there probably late in the territories. They had that hot run, and when I got there, they were coming off that hot run, so things were cooling off. Yeah, but the fans were good. Fans were really good. You did something they didn't like, they'd let you know about it. I have never been attacked there or anything, but I've heard stories about it, and you're okay, I think, till you get down into the swamps. And those people there, they don't play. They took their wrestling seriously. And I was talking earlier about that white line fever. The trips in Louisiana were so long, sometimes you'd meet yourself coming and going. That's what I'm saying is most of the guys lived down in Louisiana, and some of them lived in Alexandria. Why? Because there's nothing there, little old town, but it was the most centrally located. But I don't care where you are in Louisiana. you're a long way from somewhere else. Because sometimes you would make, every 2 weeks, you would make Tulsa and Oklahoma City on a Sunday back to back. You do, I think, Tulsa in the afternoon, and I think Oklahoma City at night. I think it may have been switched. But coming back in from either one of those towns back to Alexandria, oh, it was like a 400 miler at least. And imagine if you lived in Baton Rouge, that's another 100 and something miles. So you'd have to make a 500-mile trip. I mean, and when you told just regular people about how many miles you would actually travel, not necessarily drive, but travel, and everybody, they'd look at you like, what? 500 miles driving? Then you got to go to work the next day? That's what people don't understand about the wrestling business. They see they see TV, and they see a lot of people, and they see, guys driving new cars and this, that, and the other. But you take out the people aspect of it, is how did you get to these towns? You had to get there somehow. And back in those days, we did not fly. Maybe the world champion flew, but the regular territory guys, they didn't drive. I mean, they didn't fly. They had to drive. And many times I found myself, one time I found driving by myself, and I don't know how this ended up, but I was driving from Tulsa or Oklahoma City by myself. Something happened that my partner had to go somewhere, or whoever was riding with me went somewhere. And this is, and I've brought this up before, it is a wonder that more guys haven't been killed on the road. Mm-hmm. So I went to sleep at the wheel, and I almost went off the road. And if I'd have went off the road then, I'd have been in bad shape. It could have killed me probably.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because Junkyard Dog, he died at the wheel.
He did.
He fell asleep.
He did. Yep. Well, I don't know if that's from driving or because later on, Dog, he got involved in drugs, and he was up and down and in between and in and out. But I think he got killed I think it was on the interstate. He just ran off the road. That's what I heard. How did he die? He died in a car wreck, right?
Yeah, he definitely died in a car wreck. So this is Wikipedia again. In a single car accident in Interstate 20 near Forest, Mississippi, as he was returning home from his daughter Latoya's high school graduation in Wadesboro, North Carolina.
That's a long way.
Yeah. Apparently he was driving all through the night as well. So, I mean, whatever recreational pharmaceuticals he had in his body, he was also, to use the expression, dog-tired as well.
Well, and I've said that no matter what, it's a wonder more of us didn't get killed on the highway. Here's a story about Junkyard. He was making Puerto Rico, and I was in Puerto Rico, and he'd come in every couple of weeks. And that's the way they'd book guys. They'd bring them 2 weeks in, and then they'd leave, and they'd come back in 2 weeks. But we were there, and it's hurricane season. So here come a hurricane. I think this was before Dog got there. And I went to the airport right away, took my return ticket, and went home. Then I got home, and then I called Carlos about Monday, and I said, I had to go because of the hurricane. Send me a ticket. Okay, sent me another ticket. I go back down. 2 weeks later, here comes another hurricane. Well, screw this. I'm gone. I go to the airport, take my ticket, and I go home. So then I called Carlos. I got to send me another ticket. He said, hey, man, I can't keep buying these in and out tickets for you. Hell, you're breaking me. I said, okay, I want this last one. I get down there. Here comes another hurricane. And I try to go home, and I was too late. I mean, I was going to cash my ticket in too, by the way, even contrary to what I'd told Carlos Colon. So I couldn't get off the island. They canceled all the flights, but they canceled all the flights for Junkyard Dog. He was there that week too. Now, me and Dog were sitting there. I guess the other people that flew in, or if they were any, they were already gone. So now we're going to have to sit there and wait this hurricane out. So one night we're waiting it out, and we was in this hotel building. Dog was in one room, I was with the other, and I called his room and I said, "Hey, you okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." I said, "I'm coming over." He said, "Okay." Because I didn't think he wanted to be alone. I didn't want to be alone. So we got over there, and then all the lights went out. All the air conditioning went out. Everything went out except the street lights, which are battery powered. There's solar power, and they have a battery in there. That's the only thing you had. Man, here it came. It's supposed to be a bad one too, like 110 mile an hour winds and rain. And so we were hearing it hit every side. Boom, de bing, de bang, de bing. So we're inside. And I didn't think the building had that much of a chance to be blown away. So we made it through the night, got up the next morning, brother. It hit it and ripped it apart. Trees were down, power lines were down. It was bad. Not much traffic. And I said, I'm starving to death. Of course, our little Denny's down the street, they had closed up. Can't get nothing. We went to the Holiday Inn and stood, big time wrestlers. We stood in the soup line with everybody else. And some of the people said, "Oh, Sucio Dutch Mantell." Yeah, I do. I was this big star in the soup line with them. So that hurricane goes on through. Then I think he was there. Junkyard Dog was there for a couple of weeks. And then a couple of weeks later, in comes another hurricane. And Junkyard Dog said, "Yep, I'm not going to do it. I'm going home." And he went home. So he dodged that one. And I stayed, and it wasn't that bad. So he went home, and he's the only guy that I ever knew. I won't say this beforehand, but he went home, like say Puerto Rico's here, and he goes home to North Carolina, and the hurricane's path was like this, and it would come right back through North Carolina. He's the only guy I've ever known that got caught in the same hurricane twice. And I forgot the name of it. I had it, but it was a well-known hurricane at the time because it did a lot of damage. But it didn't quite catch him in Puerto Rico, but it did. And then he went home and he got caught with it there.
What year was it?
What year was it? It's in the 90s, is all I can say. I'd have to look it up. And I looked it up one time, and it was like a well-known hurricane, not Hugo, but it's something like that.
I forgot to ask you about the hurricane story because you teed me up beforehand and said, make sure you bring up the hurricane story. And I'm glad you sort of I'm glad you brought it up because I'd forgotten about it.
Did you know the story?
No, I didn't. I've heard part of it where you kept saying that you kept going back and forth, not on our podcast, but somewhere else. Like, because you just kept escaping the island every single time the hurricane came. You were bleeding, Carlos dry on flights. Yeah, but
talking about Dog, I was with him in WCW. But by that time, his aura had kind of passed. He was heavier. He didn't look as good. And I remember one day somebody come through there and said something to Dog, and Dog had I never knew him to have a very quick temper, but he did that day. And he got up and slapped the guy around. And the guy didn't know. I don't know what the guy did either, but he said something to the dog didn't like. Dog was sitting down. He got up and just slapped the hell out of him. And I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm thinking, I don't know the context of this, so I'm not going to say nothing. But I forgot what it was there. But that's what drugs do to you. They change your personality, and I hate it happened to Dog because he was a good guy. And when he had that accident, as soon as I heard it, I knew that he went to sleep. Mm-hmm. I don't think he hit anybody. I think he just run off the road or ran off the road. I don't know how you say that.
Single car accident. It was.
Yep. And so he went to sleep. I guarantee you. Well, I can't guarantee you. I don't know.
It was what was suspected, definitely. Just about the WCW thing, I'm going to maybe blow your mind here. When Junkyard Dog went to WCW, he was the same age as me now.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked in his 50s at that point. He just let it go. He just let himself go too far.
Okay, what was the story? Why did Junkyard Dog leave Watts?
We are going to get to that. We've got a couple of things first to go through. I want to ask you about, I think we've more or less talked about Ted DiBiase. I mean, I suppose let's actually talk about him purely as a talent. I don't know how many times you passed across other than Mid-South, but he was still one of the biggest stars in Mid-South while you were there in 1985. But purely as a talent, Ted, what did you make of him?
A great talent. I remember I was tag team partners with him one time. I forgot where. I think around Baton Rouge, around that area.
You love pronouncing that as well, don't you?
Oh yeah, Baton Rouge. I love that. The roll the R, Rouge. But I was with the Rock and Roll Express. We were tag teams against them, and we have what you call Tennessee spots, which are like kind of stupid spots. But if the people have never seen them before, which I'm sure they haven't, because Watts didn't like those spots like that. But Watts was nowhere around. He was at home in Oklahoma sipping of whatever he drank up there. So me and Robert and Ricky, we were going nuts doing these spots. And Ted had never seen them before. And I was telling him to do this and do that and do that. And he stood over there like, I don't know what you guys are doing. Not that he disliked them. He had just never seen them before. So, and I think that is the same time I think a fan came running out of the ring. I think they tried to get Ted. And I looked around and I saw Ted locked up with this fan. So I bailed out to help Ted. And I think Ted, pow, 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 he hit him a couple of times and didn't knock him down, didn't knock him out. And the guy was coming. It happened so quick. The guy was coming and pow, 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 then he was going. He ran in just to run out. And he actually ran out before the cops got there, and the cops were chasing him out of the building. I didn't even know where that was, but I always remembered that. But Ted was a great talent, good on interviews. But, of course, where he really got hot is when he became the $1 Million Man. Mm-hmm. And what a gimmick that was. I mean, we're talking about Junkyard Dog now, but when Ted got that, I mean, Vince would just give him money to go out and party in these towns so he could look like he was really making all this money.
It was more than that. He gave him first-class airfare everywhere. I think he got his cars probably paid for, limos paid for, so he could arrive at the arena like that. So he really did look like the $1 Million Man. And I'm sure that will have generated maybe some resentment from some of the other guys who, even on top of the card, who weren't getting all those perks.
Well, everybody wanted to be Ted's buddy because everything was paid for. You go there, he picks up the bar tab, and you just ride along with Ted. But he got over as a $1 Million Man. I remember one thing he did. He would bring people out of the crowd, ask them could they do this or do that.
Oh, yeah.
He brought that little boy out of the crowd that time. He said, now, if you can dribble this basketball 10 times, I'll give you $1,000. And he was little. He's like 6. And his eyes, you could tell his eyes were big. And he was like, what's happening here? He said, okay. And his mama was there too. And I said, okay, 1, 2, 3. And he had Virgil with him too. Right. And he got to 8, 9, and Ted kicked the ball. Oh my God. You talk about heat. that whole building came in on him. Well, you didn't make it, kid. You didn't make it. And it got him a lot of heat. But this is what the fans don't know, or they may know by now. They give the mom and the little boy the $1,000 because they can't really do that to the little boy, and because they'd get a lot of, especially with them, they give them the $1,000. But it was a great spot. I don't know who came up with that, but that is the great spot because nobody expects Ted to kick the ball from a little 6-year-old boy to keep him from making $1,000. He was $1 million man, but a cheap bastard. So, and he played that role right.
Hey, well, it ain't what you make, it's what you save. That's probably how he saved to be $1 million man.
Yeah, that's an old saying of the old promoter in Tennessee, Nick Goulas. Mm-hmm. A Mexican kid come to him one time. He said, "Mr. Nick, I only made $70 that week." "Goddamn, boy, that ain't what you make. It's what you save." And that was a classic line that everybody said there. Hey, it ain't what you make. It's what you save. Now, let's catch everybody up. And by the way, this is 4th of July weekend. Mm-hmm. I want to tell everybody in the United States, it doesn't mean anything to the people in the UK, but they know what it is. But I hope everybody has a safe and happy July the 4th. Hey, don't drink and drive. Don't do that, guys, please.
I was just going to say, if any country is never going to celebrate American Independence Day, I'd suspect it would be England.
No, England did the best thing by getting rid of this place. No, they did, because that couldn't have been cheap. You're 3,000 miles away, or how far it was. You had to come by ship. And how much money did they sink here? Tons.
Yeah.
Tons. Of course, they came in here and did it a different way, but still, it wasn't cheap for them. What was I saying?
4th of July weekend, don't drink and drive.
Oh, yeah, well, don't do that. But I was going somewhere. Oh, let's catch everybody up on Ted's current legal status.
Ah, I'm glad you mentioned it.
I know Ted's, I know both his sons. One's Ted Jr., and I forgot the other's name. But
Brett.
One of them, Brett, and I don't know, I'm just going to hit the top of this, is all I know. I think one of his kids went to work with with the state of Mississippi in their educational office. And they got some kind of grants, something from the federal government that somehow was corrupted into other accounts. And one of his sons has already pleaded like guilty.
Yes, Brett has. He's pleaded guilty to maybe, this is off the top of my head, I've not written it down, maybe like almost $900,000 worth of misappropriation of funds. Ted DiBiase Jr. has been indicted on a number of offences that total well over not over 7 figures, but well into the 7 figures. And I'm glad you mentioned this, because I actually have the quote that Ted gave a podcast called Going Ringside, apparently, when the hosts apparently bring up all this, and Ted responds, Ted Sr., and all of that, the indictments and such, is a bunch of garbage. I'm not at liberty to talk about it, but it's kind of like they're looking for a scapegoat. We're caught in the middle of it, DiBiase added. If I didn't have a celebrity name, they wouldn't even be looking at me. That's right. If you didn't have a celebrity name, the government would not be bothered about missing nearly $5 million worth of misappropriated funds from the Mississippi state.
Well, I hate that Ted's even involved in this, because I like Ted. But if they got a paper trail, and who else is involved in this is the NFL quarterback, Brett Favre.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he may have paid, he got paid for speeches he never gave. I mean, and these speeches aren't cheap. I'm thinking, I forgot what they paid him, like $500,000 to go speak to somebody.
Ultimately, you got $8 million or something. Like, we've already talked about all this on a previous podcast. We did go, I think it was the Kenny Bolin one? No, it wasn't. But we've done an in-depth one on this already. But Brett Favre, not Favre apparently, because that was the something about Mary pronunciation that only I've heard. But yeah, I think he's the most famous, and the DiBiase's under him are the second most famous, and probably the second most amount of money taken or supposedly, allegedly misappropriated as well. But the reason I wanted to bring up that Ted Senior was saying that all this is a bunch of garbage, quote, is how can it be when one of your sons has already pled guilty and the second son is being indicted on numerous offences, and there's, as you said this is a quote from you, the federal government doesn't open these charges, they don't start proceedings to lose these cases. They've got something solid on you if they're actually going to open them in the first place.
Well, my feelings on the federal government vary according to what they're doing, but they can't open these cases with no evidence whatsoever. And I'm not saying that anybody's guilty or anybody's innocent, but I kind of side with maybe the guilty side more than anything else. You got to be very careful with federal funds. They are a stickler for detail. And listen, if you're going to steal money or take money, take it from, I don't know, don't take it from the federal government. They got lawyers out to yin yang. They can just investigate you to death. They can actually break you by just investigating you. Just for you to get representation yourself. I mean, I don't know what it's cost Ted and his son, but I doubt if the federal government's picking up any of it.
Sorry, they've got plenty of money.
So, they took $5 million.
Yeah, they've got plenty of money for lawyers, don't worry.
Yeah. But anyway, I can't say if they're guilty or not. I hope they're not. I hope what Ted said is true, but I don't know.
Well, Brett is. He's already pled guilty. We'll move on. The Freebirds Junkyard Dog blinding feud. This will be probably a quick question. Anyway, the story goes, and this is recounted by Jim Cornette on the Dark Side of the Ring. He's blinded by the hair cream. It goes into his eyes. Michael Hayes, it was an accident, but it obviously wasn't. And there's a match where Junkyard Dog, blinded, can no longer see his newborn daughter. And he sat in the corner of the of ringside, and someone over his shoulder says something like, "Don't worry, dog, I'll get him," and points the biggest gun Dog has ever seen at Michael Hayes, who was in the ring, or the Freebirds who were in the ring. And Junkyard Dog has this sort of crisis of conscience of like, right, do I like pretend I'm still blind and not do anything, or do I reveal that actually I was never blind and then save Michael Hayes' life by grabbing the gun? Apparently it's just like a Dirty Harry kind of revolver sort of deal. And then thankfully 2 seconds later, security see this guy tackle him before a shot can be fired. Excluding Puerto Rico, because that's sort of a law unto itself, but in the territory days, how often was it that fans would threaten you with a knife, or more specifically, a gun, which is very rare? I know Bobby Heenan was shot at once. That's a famous story.
Well, I never have been threatened by a gun, or really a knife either. It's most like fists and throwing stuff, but still, when you're out there in the middle of a crowd that's kind of going berserk, you do worry about a knife, because a knife, it can just come right through them. And what they do with a knife, they take it, I'm going to tell you, that's the blade of the knife. They would do this. Just go in that far, but still they get you. It's very dangerous going through some of these crowds, especially the Puerto Rican crowds. Mm-hmm. That's where I most have the problems, because I had the most heat there, I guess. But one thing is having heat and then having speaking a foreign language to where you don't even know what they're saying. You don't even know how bad they hate you because they're speaking in another language. Now, this is what I'm going to say about that. If Dog was blind, why would he stick him in the corner? That don't make sense to me.
Why not?
Yeah.
See the dog. He can't see you, but
yeah,
buy a ticket.
And the guy had a gun and pointed it at Michael Hayes. I've never heard that story before. Possibly true. I'm not saying it's not, but well, it goes to show you how much he wanted Shows you how much you like Michael Hayes.
Yeah.
He didn't mind if he got shot or not. But I do believe it. But a lot of people, and even today, I think more people carrying guns today than they carried guns then.
Mm-hmm.
Because they carried guns then because the cops didn't care. As long as you didn't shoot nobody, and it's according to why you shot a person. I mean, they could damn settle the case on the street while they're investigating it by just not charging you with anything. Mm. The law was totally different back in those days, but people in Louisiana, those Cajuns are quite rowdy. And when you get them riled up, and the thing is, they all drank. And when you get a wrestling crowd, and I'm going to tell another story on top of this. When you get a wrestling crowd riled up and they're drinking, I mean, that's the worst type of, just think of the worst bar you've ever been in and multiply it by 200. Because you had 200 drunk wrestling fans out there. So it's crazy stuff. Crazy stuff.
We're going to move on. I know you want to refer to this. So JYD leaving Mid-South. I've got a prop here. JYD leaving Mid-South breaks Bill Watts' heart. Bill Watts buries because I've written JYD, I'm trying to say it's a word, JYD on the TV, saying he abandoned him and he abandoned all the fans of Mid-South. This is when WWF makes an overture to him, pays him double the salary, which seems like a good enough reason to leave, quite frankly. JYD's version is that he was in a bathroom stall when Grizzly Smith and Bill Watts walk in thinking they're alone. Grizzly says, I heard JYD was going to the WWF. And Bill Watts said, don't worry, that ain't going nowhere. Dog heard it, and that's when he decided to leave. Now, Bill Watts has later claimed none of this happened and was a complete fiction. What do you think?
Well, you're asking me, do I think that Bill Watts used the N-word? And I can say that he probably did. So this was, how long ago was it JYD was in the WWF?
I think he went in 84, so the year before you
40 years. Yeah. Watts probably used the word. See, he would use African Americans, but he used them because they meant business. They'd make him money, and they'd make money too. But he wasn't above using the word.
Would it be tasteless of me to describe it as colourful language? There's a bit of play on words there.
You can.
Okay, we'll say that. Bill's a bit of a funny one in the sense that he always sort of says, I'm not racist. Look, I push Junkyard Dog. Look, I push Ron Simmons, that kind of thing. But the fact is that I think he's also quoted as saying, hey, my favourite colour's green. So he's sort of like everything's a means to an end rather than proving one thing or another in that sense, which if you're a businessman, is the right way to be, especially when you look out at the audience and so much of the audience is black. Then why wouldn't you have a black star?
You would have to, if you had any sense at all. Do I think he's racist? I mean, that term has been used so much. It's used for stuff now. It's used for the LGBTQ conversation. You're racist. What's that got to do with it? That's, you're talking about sexual persuasion and actually race. It's not even a connection. But personally, I don't think he was racist, that he hated black people. I don't think he was like that. I don't. Because he had to work with them. And I think he liked Junkyard Dog. Mm-hmm. He liked Butch Reed. He liked all those guys.
Ernie Ladd.
He would invite Ernie Ladd. He would invite them to his house. So, but he could use the word, but the word was used back in those days just offhandedly.
We'll move. I'm actually going to skip Jim Ross. I've got a question about Jim Ross, but we're going to move on. JYD's black copycat replacement. So Junkyard Dog leaves, and then Bill Watts basically continuously has the same idea over and over and over again of bringing in a new top babyface who's black to appeal to the black fans as well as the white fans, I'm sure. I've got a couple. There's one I can't remember the name of. I've not written it down. George Wells. He also went to the WWF, and then he basically was jobbed out really quickly. And then I think he had some terrible drug abuse, I think, and left. Brickhouse Brown, who was never pushed as like a top guy, but he had the boombox, and we talked about him a couple of weeks ago. Butch Reed we'll mention in a minute, but the Snowman is one of the more interesting ones because in
Memphis.
Yes, because Jerry Lawler and who else trained him? I didn't write down who else trained him. Someone else trained him. Around 1984, he appeared in Memphis for a short while. Then he appeared in Mid-South for a short while. Then he just disappeared off the face of the earth. Turned up in USWA in 1990, and he wins the USWA Unified World Title. Do you want to tell us the story about after he wins the belt?
Well, he wins the belt, and the Snowman, which is he's not a Harvard graduate, let me say that, but I think he got kind of miffed or pissed off about his payoff. He didn't think, I guess he thought the world's champions got paid differently, I guess. But he got his payoff and he didn't like it, and he wanted more money. So he told Lawler he wanted more money, and Lawler says, well, I'm not giving him more money. And he kept on and on and on. Now, Lawler should have thought, wait a minute, the guy's got the belt, so I might need to kind of pacify him a little bit. And then all of a sudden, Lawler didn't give him any money. He took the hard stand. Well, the next thing the Snowman did was he said, well, I'm keeping the belt. And I've had this pulled on me too. I think I may have already told this story. But next thing Lawler knew, the Snowman had gone to a pawn shop, and I don't know, got, a couple $100 or $100 or whatever for the belt, and he wouldn't give it back. So did Lawler ever get that belt back?
I think it may be missing forever. Put in the comments, tell us where that belt might be. But that's the first time the USWA title would go walkabout. Not the last, as we've discussed on previous podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
But no, right, so the Snowman, Eddie Crawford, his real name was. He died a couple of years ago as well, I didn't realise. He said that he never actually pawned it. He threatened to, or basically gave a line to whoever it was, Jerry or Jerry Jarrett or whoever it was, saying, I'm going to take this and pawn it to a drug dealer or something like that. But I actually don't think anyone quite knows the actual whereabouts of where that belt went. Maybe one person does who bought it, who knows.
Well, that's why I say I don't know why Lawler or Jerry Jarrett, and I like both those guys, I don't know why they just said, okay, why didn't they try to pacify him at the time? I don't think they thought far enough ahead. No, he won't do that. He won't do that. He won't do that. Well, he did do that, and the belt's missing. Now they got to go and get another belt, which I think they did. That was the original, right?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what the other belt was. Apparently, it was the AWA, or a version of the AWA title that Lawler won, and then they had to sort of repurpose that. I don't know if they put stickers on it or something, just USWA over the A or something. But yeah,
I had that belt. I cannot remember what it looks like.
Oh,
I never took any. Yeah,
I'll find it. I'll find it later. Do you remember Leon Spinks at this time coming in to referee one of the Jerry Lawler Snowman matches?
I think that was one of the times I would come into Memphis, stay a month, and take off again. Mm. I don't remember Spinks coming in.
That's fine. With Snowman, we sort of launched into the story rather than the person. But you said probably not a Harvard graduate, but Snowman stories in general. Were you in Mid-South at the same time as him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was he being pushed as the new Junkyard Dog at that time? Was he a level below? Or
yes. Every African American black guy. They were looking for a replacement. But you just don't replace junkyard dogs every day. That's a certain type of individual that had the magic, that had the chemistry, that had the touch, that the people accepted him. You just don't go down the street and say, just say, hey, come here and put these tights on. We're going to take you out there and you're going to be the new junkyard dog. Don't work like that, as they found out. Mm-hmm. But they tried, who was the first guy? George, what was his name? George Wells?
Yeah, there was George Wells. There was Butch Reed. There was
Butch Reed.
Brickhouse Brown.
Brickyard.
There was one other guy, I can't remember his name, who they tried. Maybe in UWF, where just before they closed in 87 or something. Can't remember him.
Well, it didn't work. The closest one it may have worked with would be Butch.
Yeah.
It may have worked with him because he was over to a certain degree. And they tried it with Brickhouse. That bombed. And I was the designated, let me tell you my place in Louisiana wrestling history. After the dog, because I carry a bullwhip, and a bullwhip is a sign of slavery. Mm-hmm. I call myself the designated Afro-American wrestler. Because every time I go out there and take that bullwhip, and a lot of these towns, demographically, were like 80% black, especially in Mississippi, southern Mississippi. And when I'd walk out there with that whip, brother, silence. They didn't say, oh, we're going to kill you. We're going to. They didn't say nothing. They just looked at me like this, like, which is unnerving. Now you don't know what they're going to do. So I would get in the ring and they would get with the match. And then at the end, of course, I would pull the bullwhip off like I was going to whip the black guy. Mm. Oh, my God. That pissed. And then, of course, guess what? The black guy got the whip off me. They went nuts. And we'd hit me one time, pow, because it wouldn't be cracking. He'd just be hitting me with it. And I'm saying, pow, pow. They're going crazy, pow, pow. And then I'd run away. Oh, well, they love that. And I always made sure in front of those crowds, I never went too far. Because you don't know what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. I don't know. See, Ernie Ladd told me, he said, boy, Ernie Ladd, a great guy. And he told me more stories about Civil War, the slavery days. But he was like a historian too. Hmm. And he says when he was a kid, his grandmama would gather him and his cousins around the stove, where the heat was in the winter. And it was story time. And the grandmother would start telling these stories to these little kids. And he said that's where he learned it. You know the term cracker?
Yes.
Some white people in the South are called crackers. Mm. You know where that term comes from?
I don't know.
Well, when they had the big plantations, now listen, don't let anybody tell you folks that story time with Dutch is not an educational experience. This comes from Ernie Ladd, telling me from ground level where the terms come from. He says, and they would have a guy in the cotton fields ride around on the horse, see if everybody was working. And he carried a whip with him. Uh-huh. And when you heard that whip crack, they said, here comes the cracker. Here's the cracker. That's where it comes from. And I never would have known that. Oh, I may have read it, but I don't think I've ever read anything like that. But that's what Ernie Ladd told me. His grandmother told me. So that was tales that probably the woman's grandmother told her. And it just came down to the little grandchild level. And that's where he learned it, which actually makes sense. Here comes the cracker. It's a white guy with a whip. They really call it the whip, the cracker, but it became synonymous with the white guy. I mean, not to get off on some race-based rant here, but because all these little terms, they have a beginning spot somewhere, and that was it.
I love the etymology of words, yep. The history of where words come from. I do like it. Sorry.
And Ernie Ladd, I learned so much by just traveling with him. So he didn't have anybody really travel with him, but he liked me for some reason. He liked me. And we would fly from Alexandria. I guess he lived there too. I don't know where he lived. We would fly to New Orleans. Take you about 45 minutes. And sometimes he wouldn't charge me anything. Just fly down just to keep him company. So, and I would ride with him, and he would tell me all these stories, great stories. And I'm trying to think of one he told me one time that not everybody knows, but he told me about his college football career. And it's funny that I'm talking about Ernie Ladd. When I was about 18 years old, I watched the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And it was when number 3 was when the AFL finally beat the NFL. That was the big rivalry. And I think it was when the New York, I don't know, the Jets with Joe Namath. They won the Super Bowl. They had Ernie Ladd on that day to be interviewed about the game and all. He didn't want to talk about the game. All he talked about is, hey, let me tell you, brother. He said, and he gave a date. He said, I'm going to step in the ring with the Bruno Sammartino, and I'm going to whoop you, Sammartino, like a low-life, egg-sucking dog. And he said, yeah, but let's talk about Namath in the third quarter here. And he said, oh, yeah, well, but let me tell you, Bruno, he would not talk about the game. He promoted Madison Square Garden with Bruno. And that's the first time I ever heard of Bruno Sammartino. And the announcer couldn't get him off wrestling to talk about the Super Bowl that had just happened. This was nationwide TV. And he was talking about the big main event at Madison Square Garden was Ernie the Cat Ladd versus Bruno Sammartino. Let me tell you, Sammartino, oh, it was great. And I cannot find that tape anywhere. So if anybody out there, maybe you can find it, but I'm just not looking in the right places.
Yeah. So Super Bowl III, 1969, Orange Bowl, Miami, Florida. So if it was that one.
Probably. Was it the Jets and somebody?
New York Jets defeated the Baltimore Colts 16-7.
Yep.
There you go. So if anyone's got the TV broadcast of that with Ernie Ladd doing the interview somehow, I don't know who'd be recording it in 1969, but...
Well, yeah, but see, you find all those games. It was a network telecast.
Yeah, they probably would have saved it.
It's got to be somewhere.
Somebody.
But that was the first time I'd ever even heard of Bruno Sammartino. But I thought it was great because, damn, I thought he was going to be in trouble. He didn't give a crap. He'd already quit football anyway, and he was going to wrestling.
I've dribbled water all down my face now. Oh, Jesus. I did it too quickly. One more thing I just want to add. This is what I was saying before, where I couldn't remember the last guy that was a junkyard dog replacement. Savannah Jack. That was the name I was looking for. I don't even... He's so not famous.
Great name.
Oh, yeah.
But I met him maybe once. But again, like I'm saying, replacing Junkyard Dog is not as you just don't replace him overnight.
We are going to move on now. I think we've only got a couple of questions left, and then we are going to shut down this podcast. And I always threaten that, I know. What am I going to ask? Stories on Butch Reed. Now, that's a name we've not spoken about. Someone we've not talked about his effectiveness in Mid-South after JYD's departure. Was he... you said before he was the most likely candidate to replace Junkyard Dog and actually have at least some impact.
Well, totally different personalities from Junkyard Dog. Butch was a good guy, and he spoke in such a way that you didn't envision peril or devastation. He kind of talked kind of soft, but he talked rough, but there was a difference. Good guy to work with. Good guy. He's passed away now.
Yeah. Oh, Butch Reed. I thought he was alive still, or has he just died recently?
I think he'd look it up. I think he died a couple of years ago.
Okay. Well, I looked that up. One of the things about Butch Reed we always hear about is just of a territory full of badasses, like even Matt Bourne, let's say, but your Ted DiBiase's and Steve Williams and your Jim Duggans and all that kind of thing. Where does Butch rank for you, and have you got any stories about him in that vein?
Well, I remember one night, it was in Tulsa, and John Nord, you know who I'm talking about? John Nord.
It was. He did die 2 years ago, sorry. I just wanted to get that out there. You were right. I don't know how I forgot that one. John Nord.
They weren't getting along in their matches. And Bill Watts saw it. And one thing about Watts, if two guys if they had an issue, instead of them having it out in the ring, which was the worst place to have it, because even though it wasn't televised, the people in that town, shoot fights. Either one guy wins and the other guy runs off, but they're kind of boring, really. And they only last 30 seconds, and the fight's usually over, most of them. So they were having a problem, and he called them together. I think it was in Tulsa, I think. And I don't know. And he took them into a room, and he says, "Hey, we're not going to have this." And he said, "Now, if you guys got a problem," and I will say this about Watts, he did know how to end problems. He carried them in a room. He says, "Hey, might as well get it over right now. If you're going to fight now, and no matter who wins, it doesn't exit the room, and it's over, right?" And they both said, okay. They shook hands before the fight. Then they started fighting. Of course, they landed, I don't know, the fight went on maybe, John told me, fight went on about a minute. He said, I got him some good shots. He said he got me some good shots, and then he was locked up, and, and then Watts stepped out and said, all right, guys, is that enough? You want to continue? You want to go? And neither one of them said nothing because nobody wanted to give in first. But neither one would disagree not to stop it. So they said, yeah. And he said, it's over, right? And they said, okay, it's over. They shook hands and they left, and they never had another problem. Because that was actually smart on Watts' part, because he was trying to push these two guys, and he wanted Butch to get over. And none of these guys came close to Dog. They just didn't come close to him. He had the personality, he had the aura, he had the gift, and I call it magic sometimes. He had the magic. They didn't have the magic. They had the tricks, didn't have the magic.
They didn't have the hat to pull the bunny rabbit out, sort of thing. How bruised up was John when he was telling you this story?
Well, I think he had a little bit of a cut right here under his eye. Then he said he landed some big shots. He said they rocked me, but he said I rocked him back. So, but both those guys are big guys. Butch was about 240, 250 maybe. Nord was bigger than that. Nord was like 260, 270, and he was taller. So, but so you never knew John Nord, did you?
I've never talked to him. No, I think I'd have him on. He's going to be very entertaining.
That son of a bitch is hilarious, but nobody ever knew it. See, he didn't go to a lot of territories. I think he went there, and I think he was kind of AEW. I mean,
AWA,
Minnesota.
He was in WWF for a couple of years. I'm trying to think where else he would have turned up. Maybe Japan. He was doing the Bruiser. I know in WWF he was doing the Bruiser Brody rip-off, quite frankly, with a Viking hat on.
And actually did it pretty good. No, not bad. But if you rode with him, he loved my humor. I loved his humor. So we entertained each other for the trip. And I have never really laughed harder than I was when I was with John. And he said the same thing about me. Good guy.
Future
really
guest.
Good guy.
Future guest, eh? Maybe.
I got to run him down. Okay, let me tell the people now. We had Ricky Morton scheduled for today. But a lot of times, folks, they're wrestlers. They will tell you one thing and then tell you something else. But Ricky had to go somewhere that he said he forgot about. I think his wife did remind him we're going somewhere, so you can't do that. And I had another guest scheduled to come on here. And then again, that something happened to there. But I will look up John Nord and we'll bring him on the show. Because now, wait a minute, I have brought some people on the show that I thought would be good guests. Have I brought one on that wasn't a good guest?
I don't think so. I think we've all had good guests.
Yeah.
Well, were you going to name someone who wasn't a good guest?
No, they've always been good guests, but I'm saying, we look at different, data that tell you things. Yeah. But
I think John Nord would be surprisingly good. I know he's done interviews elsewhere that I think have done quite well. So, and also he's been really great on them. So I reckon John Nord would be a good get.
And I have Jimmy Hart scheduled at some time. I think would be a great guest. Mm-hmm. And who else did I have scheduled?
I can't remember. We've had Bradshaw. We've been threatening for so long.
I thought we had Bradshaw.
No, we've never had Bradshaw.
Never had him?
No.
Well, we'll write him down, by God. He'll come on. He loves to come on.
I'm going to end this podcast on one quick. In fact, it's sort of something I want to say about the Dark Side of the Ring thing. They made two claims that I think were false. One of them is, or maybe Jim Ross said at the beginning, about the Junkyard Dog.
Yeah.
And it was the people on it who made claims that I disagree with. One, I think maybe Jim Ross said Junkyard Dog was the most popular black wrestler ever. The Rock is the most popular black wrestler ever. I'm so, with all due respect to Junkyard Dog. Second thing I want to mention is, I think Coco Beware says something similar to this, but basically they said Junkyard Dog, when he's in the WWF, he was held down because of his colour. But the thing is, that's not true at all, because in the first couple of years, he had a great run near the top. He made tons of money. He was making quarterly checks in six figures just from the LJN dolls in the first year, before they realised that they could stiff people on payments, royalty payments. The reason why Junkyard Dog wasn't as big a star in Mid-South than he was in the WWF, because the WWF had Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and Andre the Giant and Roddy Piper, and these are the cream of the crop of 80s wrestling. So he's got all the competition in the world. Someone made, I think Coco said, look at Butch Reed. He didn't do that much in the WWF and insinuate because he was black. No, it's because he stopped turning up. He started no-showing shows right before he was going to win the Intercontinental Championship, and that's how Honky Tonk Man ended up with it, I think. And then Coco Beware sort of gives him, or someone gives Coco Beware as an example, and the knock on Coco was he was always just too short in the Land of Giants. He was 5'6", but I think the documentary is trying to hint that it was about race, when I really don't think it was in that sense. So that was just something I wanted to bring up about the documentary. I know that you haven't watched it, so you can't really speak on that. We've talked about the WCW run. There's one famous story, apparently a fight between New Jack and Junkyard Dog, but I don't suspect you know it.
I don't know that.
I think JYD owed New Jack money for weed, and that's the entire story. And then a fight ensued from that. And then
who won the fight?
New Jack did, unsurprisingly. He generally won the fights. Generally started them as well.
Well, the only fight I knew New Jack got into, he attacked an old wrestler named Gypsy Joe
Mm-hmm.
in a little town close to Nashville for no reason that I could see, other than Gypsy Joe wasn't a great seller. And Gypsy Joe was a tough son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Tough bastard. And it looked like Junkyard Dog New Jack hit him with everything he had, and Joe still didn't go down. And Joe was in probably at that time, late 60s, probably maybe a little older.
Mm-hmm.
And still, see, they're in a wrestling match that you expect, and this is what I don't like about it. You're in a wrestling match where you expect your opponent to work. It's not a shoot. It's not a real fight till it turns into one. But I think New Jack, who's also passed away, he died how long ago? A year ago, maybe?
This year, I think last year, or
Yeah.
maybe 2021 or something. I don't know. Recently.
And he hit Gypsy with a chair hard, but he still didn't go down. So I don't know how it ended up, but I don't think you could say that Gypsy Joe took a beating, but he didn't take the loss. He was still standing. So that's what I don't like about that.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a lot of respect for. I mean, I met New Jack. He was civil to me. I was civil to him. Remember when he threw that guy off that scaffold?
Vic Grimes.
Yeah, he wanted to kill him, he said.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, if somebody has that mindset of, I don't want to be around them. Because, hell, he could get mad at me and do the same thing. He was like, I don't know. I just don't like stuff like that.
No, I mean, there's far more stories about New Jack. I mean, fight between him and one of the pit bulls in ECW, a fight between him and Bulls Mahoney in ECW, a fight between him and Sandman in ECW. These are the ones people have just told me. I mean, there are more out there. But anyway, enough about New Jack. This was about Junkyard Dog. We have reached our exact mark to shut off the podcast for now. If you're listening all this way through, hopefully you are anyway. We have a second companion podcast coming out this following Tuesday, which will be July 4th, of course, wouldn't it? Independence Day.
Yeah. What's the name of it?
I don't know. It'd be the same one. Storytime with Dutch. If this is episode 57, we'll call it 57.5. How about that? Where we're just asking fan questions. So if you want to submit your fan questions, it's questionsfordutch@gmail.com. Email them to there, and I will add them to the list, and hopefully we'll get through a lot more questions than we have done recently. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Dutch, we will catch you on Tuesday, and we, the people, for the 4th of July.